Here we go. Bash, the final version. The ultimate pit pushing build. This build has no bleed, no thorns, and has taken me beyond tier 120 of the pits without the use of a single Holy Bolt elixir. I haven't even pushed this build to its limits, and it just keeps on getting better and better. By the end of this video, you will have every tool that you're going to need to start working your way to the high end of the pit. I took a lot of time to go into detail for all of the little tips and tricks that I've learned to get this build to where it is. Make sure you watch as much as you can of this video to get your Bash Barbarian set up for success. Check this out. We're going to break down the skill tree. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this because this is going to be really important to get a good setup and really understand what you're doing if you want to start pushing high tiers in the pit. We want to stack as many points into Bash as you possibly can, and I'll show you why. When you go to your pants, you can get a greater affix of ranks to Bash. This can actually roll up to 8. If you look at Bash right now, you're getting 112 damage at your maximum. If you take off the 7 ranks, it goes down to 73,000. Jumping back up that 40,000 points in damage, that's about 33% increase of damage just by adding 7 ranks. We're also adding 4 ranks by running the Harlequin's Crest. I'm going to be covering this build with all of the Uber Uniques that you're going to possibly need because we're going to be pushing high tiers. You don't need to have any of these if you want to push tier 113, 114. As soon as you start getting into the 120s, 121, 122, you need all of the damage that you possibly can get. The damage reduction really isn't as much of a problem as doing enough damage. So having that 4 ranks to Bash from the Harlequin's Crest is a massive buff. So I'll have a variant in the planner without any Uber Uniques so that you can go through it and look. We're talking pushing high tiers. So those high tiers, you're going to try and get the best gear you can. They have the option to craft now. Uber Uniques are dropping more than they ever have in any other season before from all of the bosses. So get out there, get some Uber Uniques if you need to. If you haven't crafted any yet, that's the first one to craft. Get your Harlequin's Crest because that is the biggest and most used Uber Unique that's out there right now. Let's hop back into our skill tree. We're going to be doing 1 point in Enhanced Bash. Because we took no core skills, we have to have that many points in order to move down. What Enhanced Bash does, damaging a stun enemy with Bash grants 20% maximum life as fortified. We're going to be running Concussion. Concussion is going to have a lucky hit chance to stun. 30% of lucky hit chance, and Bash has a 50% chance. So we're going to have a relatively high chance to stun, and that's going to grant us our Fortify as we're running through. Only when we're running through trash. We're not going to be getting any of that Fortify when we're fighting bosses because bosses can't be stunned. They can be staggered. Moving down, we're going to be taking Imposing Presence. In the planner, I'm going to have Tempering that I actually haven't been able to get yet. I'm still waiting on gear, but if you want to push this build to the absolute max, follow the tempering and follow the affixes in the planner, not exactly what you see here. We're going to do 3 points in a Martial Vigor for damage reduction against elites. We're going to drop Rallying Cry. We're not going to be running Rallying Cry for this variant. We're going to be running Iron Skin all the way down through Tactical Iron Skin. So we get our heal, we're going to get our barrier, we're going to get Unstoppable from one of our aspects, and 35% damage reduction every single time that we use Iron Skin. It is a very, very, very impressive skill. We're going to be getting Outburst and Tough as Nails. This is where we get our Thorns and our Bleed damage from. This is going to be used to swap out some glyphs for extra damage to bleeding enemies. It also activates our Blood Rage node when you're clearing trash. We're going to be doing 1 point into Challenging Shout and then 1 point into Enhanced Challenging Shout. Warcry into Enhanced Warcry. And here's where we're going to be making a swap. We're not going to take Power Warcry for this. We're going to be taking Mighty Warcry. The only source of vulnerable generation that we have right now is going to come from Warcry. We're going to be getting just a very, very small amount from Thick Skin, but it is very, very small. So we're going to need to be fortified, especially in boss fights. Because we're dropping Rallying Cry, we're going to be taking Power Warcry. Now, if you feel okay, or you want to drop Iron Skin and run Rallying Cry for your fortify, then you can stick with Power Warcry. This will actually help a little bit in clearing trash and getting to the bosses faster, which is actually incredibly important in high-level pits. We're running Booming Voice. This is going to increase the duration of our 2 shouts. Uptime on Warcry is great because that's going to give us more damage, which we absolutely 100% need, and then also gives us uptime on Challenging Shout, which is a huge, huge damage reduction, 48% right there. We're going to be running Swiftness We need movement speed to dodge boss mechanics. I'll have a variant where we actually may not need this, and we might be able to swap this around. We're going to be running 3 points into aggressive resistance here. This is going to give us 12% damage reduction. Coming down, we're going to be running Pit Fighter. This is going to give us 9% increased damage up close and 6% damage reduction against distant enemies. We have no real damage reduction against distance enemies. This is the only source of it that we have, so any little bit is going to help something. Slaying Strikes. The reason that we're taking this, and remember, this is a high tier pushing build. We're designing this to get as far as we can into the pit without having to rely on bleed or flay or thorns or anything. That we're taking a pure bash build as far as we can. In that last 35% life of those monsters, you have all 3 echoes spawning. That means that it's going to get super chaotic. It's going to be stuff all over the place. You're going to have to be dodging all over the place. You want to do as much damage in that last 35% as you can. So this 23% multiplier, while they are below 35% life, is really, really important. We're going to be running Rupture with this. The reason that we're going to be running Rupture is because we want to get this 40% increased attack speed bonus. This is going to allow us to run Intercom on our two-handed weapon to take advantage of a bigger buff, so we don't have to run Rapid on our two-handed weapon. I'll talk about Rupture again when we get back to the aspects. Steel Grasp all the way down through Fighter's Steel Grasp. This is going to be our source of Berserking and our source of vulnerable damage. Every 2 seconds we'll have Berserking when we use this, and then 3 seconds of vulnerable. We want to use this as much as possible because Berserking gives a 100% increase to damage. Super, super, super key that you get this off cooldown as much as possible. 1 point in the Thick Skin, just so that we can unlock a counteroffensive. This is the reason that we're going to need to make sure that we stay fortified. We're getting that extra 12% multiplicative damage while we're over 50% fortified. Coming down, we're going to be running Duelist. Attack speed is increased by 9% while using one-handed weapons. We want to stack increased attack speed. The soft cap on attack speed is 100%. The hard cap is 150. If anybody else has different numbers than that, let me know. That was the numbers that I was given and that I got. With this build right now, that is about where I'm at. I'm about 150 when all of my buffs are up, and the attacks are very, very fast. We're going to be running Wallop using a bludgeoning weapons. Those skills deal 15% increased damage to stunned or vulnerable enemies. We're going to be dealing damage to stunned and vulnerable enemies. And we're going to be using a one-handed mace, which is bludgeoning. Moving down to Concussion. We touched on this a little bit. This is going to give us our small lucky hit chance to stun enemies. We're going to get a lot of Fortify while we're running through the pits here. Just for a little bit of extra max fury, we'll put 1 point into Tempered Fury, and then we're going to be going into Unconstrained for that additional 100% damage into Berserking. That's a skill tree when we're going to be using a regular amulet with adaptability on it. I'm going to cover just another skill tree, just with a couple changes that we're going to make. I'm not going to cover the whole thing because most of the skills are going to stay the same. But I have a setup for Heart of Selig. Now, running the Heart of Selig with this build is actually a little bit increased to damage, and it is incredibly tanky. Most of the mechanics, you can sit there and just soak the damage. All of the trash mobs, you can pull a big, gigantic group together, and you just sit there and you tank. As long as you can maintain your unstoppable, then that's what we're going to be doing. The skill tree will change just slightly, so let's cover that right now. What we're going to do, based on having the Heart of Selig, we don't need quite as much damage reduction for this. So we're going to take 2 points out of aggressive resistance. We're going to put those 2 points into Tempered Fury. With this build, I was able to run without Iron Skin on. So we're actually going to take points out of Iron Skin, and I'm going to put them back into Rallying Cry. We were able to maintain a lot more Fortify with Rallying Cry up, and it also was a great source of Unstoppable that lasted longer than Iron Skin did. The only other change that I made was I took that 3 points out of Concussion. I know that we won't get Fortify from using Bash. However, if we put this into Guttural Yell, we're now gaining an additional 12% damage reduction. With the Heart of Selig running Mighty Warcry and running Strategic Rallying Cry, we're always going to be at 100% fortified. This really, really helps, and it actually worked really, really well. I was able to clear 120. Those are the minor changes that we're going to make in order to switch from a regular amulet with adaptability to your Heart of Selig. Now, when we get to our aspect section of this build, I'll go over the changes of where to move your aspect, where to move adaptability, because we're still going to be using it, but that's going to be later on in the video. This is just going to be your skill changes for when we're going from a regular amulet to a Heart of Selig. All right, I'm going to cover the Paragon board. I did make changes to the Paragon board, but the good news is you don't have to reset the whole board. The only thing that we did is we took all of the points that came out of your run to Bonebreaker all the way back down to here. You even can get rid of this if you needed to, but I left it just for the extra damage. And then we're going to move those around. So you just follow along with the Paragon board so that you can see where it goes. But we'll start with the beginning. We took all of the HP nodes here. So we pathed around through here, which is different than the other one. We took these HP nodes. So we're running Exploit Glyph for a little bit of extra vulnerable damage when we first attack. And then every 20 seconds, enemies also become vulnerable again. When we came up, this board changed a little bit also. This is going to be your Blood Rage node. In order to get your Blood Rage node to have that 30% bonus, all you need to do is have 300% damage while berserking. I have a little bit over just so the way that I set up my weapons. It was very, very simple to do. You don't have to do it this way if you wanted to do a two-handed weapon plus a one-handed weapon plus a ring, or if you wanted to build into your Paragon nodes here, so you can go damage while berserking, damage while berserking. That's also another way to do it. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. I took the lazy route, but if we wanted to squeeze as absolutely much as possible out here, then you want to get that damage while berserking number to as close to 300 as possible. In this board, we're running Ire. This gives us extra damage while berserking, and while berserking, you take reduced damage from elites. The changes that I made to this board, we pathed up here in order to get your maximum life. So we're trying to stack as much life as we can for this. So we pathed up here to get just a little bit more life. Moving over, this board, which is going to be your Warbringer board, didn't change at all. So you don't really need to worry about moving around this board too much if you've already taken on the 2.5 version of this build. In this board, we're going to be running Crusher. Even though we took the points out of Bonebreaker, we actually still overpower quite often. I see a lot of numbers going off. So we're going to be adding additional damage to overpower when we are wielding a mace, and some additional damage to maces when we're using it, which we're going to be using a one-handed mace here. Moving up, we already talked about the changes here, where we removed all the skill points. This board here, we're going to be running Territorial. Gives us damage reduction and additional damage to close. I put one additional point into damage reduction while healthy for us. Moving down into your Carnage board. I moved some skill points around here so that we could activate this rare node. We were so close, but this is also very specific to my gear. If you're not going to hit this node with these 2 willpower points, then you can move this around a little bit and you can put these back into any other damage reduction nodes. You have some over here that you could end up going into if you wanted to. So if you don't activate that node with your board, because my gear has a lot of all stats on it, put your points into damage reduction nodes so that you can stay healthier longer. So it's going to be very specific to your gear, so you're going to make a couple of adjustments that way. But in the Carnage board, we're going to be running Martial. This is going to give us that extra damage reduction from close on these nodes here. And it also gives that extra willpower, which helped me get over that mark there, and then a little bit of extra damage while berserking. Coming up, we're going into the Flawless Technique board. We're going to be running Ambidextrous here. We're going to get an 8% multiplicative damage while using a one-handed weapon. And then we're also going to be getting some damage reduction from close here. So we're actually going to be running a ton of damage reduction from close, which is great. We're a little bit off of this willpower. If you wanted to activate these nodes, there is a way to do it. It's going to take away a little bit from our damage, but if you find yourself feeling a little bit too squishy for whatever content you're pushing based on where your gear is at, if you put a willpower node, which is your sapphires, into any of your pieces of gear, this will give you 100 willpower. If we go back into the Paragon board, we come back up into this rare node, one of those gems would activate this node for us here. That would give us another 4.5% damage reduction. That's just an option for you guys if you want to do it, if you find yourself feeling squishy, but for now, we're just going to leave the board exactly how it is. Moving into our last and final board, this board is going to be your Decimator board. In that board, you're going to be running Revenge. As I said before, we needed that extra damage boost to get through these high tiers. If this is something that you need to, you can swap this out for something like Undaunted. This will give you an additional 10% damage reduction while giving you some damage while fortified. It is a complete swap. If you don't need to worry about changing any points around, so you can just swap those 2 out. I moved a little bit through here down to max life, so we could add in another 8%. If you did end up putting in your willpower gems, you can activate another 4% max life here. And then you can activate this node here to give yourself additional 4% damage reduction. And then we'll have also that other 4.5% here too. As you can see, the Paragon board is very fluid. So you don't have to follow it to a T. If something is going to work better for your build, you can move a couple points here and there around. You can swap a couple glyphs, practice with it, try it out, see what works best for you. This is a really, really good shell. And then as you saw for me, I move things around all the time. I'm changing glyphs, I'm changing things. I'll have it in the planner what I think is going to be the best to push. But if you find yourself feeling squishy or you find yourself feeling really tanky but not doing enough damage, you can make a couple of the changes that I suggested there. I'm going to go over the gear, the affixes, and the aspects. We're going to start with the version that doesn't include Melted Heart of Selig, and then we'll include that in. We'll change around some of the aspects so you can see which ones you're going to need to do in order to get the Melted Heart of Selig to work for this build. As we talked about before, we're going to be running the Harlequin's Crest for this. If you absolutely have to, because you haven't gotten this yet, you can't craft it, you can run a regular helmet. You're going to try and find something that looks like this, but you can replace that armor with cooldown reduction. And if your resistances are good, you can replace the lightning with something like Imposing Presence to give yourself a little bit more HP. When we were going over Bash, we were talking about the ranks to Bash. This is very important, and that's why we're running the Harlequin's Crest. I didn't get the tempering right on this yet, so I'll probably end up having to reset it. I wanted cooldown reduction. Resource generation for a Bash Barbarian is the absolute worst one that you could possibly get. It lends 0 to this build. We spend 0 resources, so generation on resources is completely null and void. That was the worst one I could have gotten. That was my rank 12, so I'm going to have to reset this and re-roll it again. For the chest piece, we're going to be running Iron Warrior. This makes our Iron Skin super tanky. Iron Skin grants an Unstoppable, which is really, really great because there is a ton of crowd control that goes off when you're fighting high-level bosses. Even low-level bosses, it's all the same, so having Unstoppable is never a problem. If you look at Iron Skin, you get a barrier that absorbs 98% or more of your maximum life. While Iron Skin is active, you heal for 10% of the barrier's original amount of life per second. I've never used Iron Skin once and never healed the full. This is a full heal. It's a barrier. It's 35% damage reduction, and it's unstoppable. It is an amazing skill. There is not much out there that is like this. This is an all-around, oh crap moment, hit the button, and you're safe. For the tempers and for your affixes, we're running Strength, Maximum Life, Iron Skin ranks. Now with this here, this is set up for Iron Skin. With the Melted Heart of Selig, we won't be running Iron Skin, so you're going to be able to re-roll something else. So if we come over to the Enchanting tab, you can use this little button here to view the possible affixes of what you can get. When we swap to our Melted Heart of Selig, I have a shadow resistance that is tempered onto my amulet. So I lose out on that, so I won't actually be capped on resources. When you're looking for a chess piece to replace your Melted Heart of Selig, if that is an option for you, then you're going to want to roll any of your resistances. If not, then you can choose any other ones here. We have armor is a great choice if you want to move something off of your boots, because I have armor on my boots. I could roll ranks to Warcry here, and that would be super beneficial, honestly, because having more damage you can never argue with. So if you need to move that back over when you put the Melted Heart of Selig on, that's a really, really great option instead of the ranks of Iron Skin. For the tempering, you can run Crowd Control Duration. What Crowd Control Duration will really affect is your Challenging Shout. Challenging Shout haunts enemies, which can be increased by size with Crowd Control Duration. When the taunt is increased, the damage reduction is also increased. Running Crowd Control Duration is actually a really great way to stagger bosses and keep your damage reduction up for even longer. I have to have poison resistance on my chest because I need the temper. You have to have at least 2 tempers of resistances in order for you to maintain your cap on resistance. The gloves, we're running Pain Quarters. When we get into the gameplay loop, I'll go over exactly how this worked. I got incredibly lucky here. I wanted 2 to attack speed and 1 to critical strike chance. That is what gives me this really, really high attack speed and a really high critical strike chance bonus. So it's a very lucky temper. So when you're trying to build your Pain Quarters, even if they're not greater affixes, these are the ones that you want to try and roll your 25% masterworking on. Coming down to the pants, we're going to be running Undying on the pants. Our attack speed is so high that 2% life gain every time you cast a skill. You're going to watch your life dip and then go right back up. It's honestly very crazy to watch. It's very, very, very fast healing. In order to maintain our resistances at max, we need to have resistance all in one piece of gear. Mine ended up on my pants. If I wanted to be a little bit more tanky HP wise, I could have health on this instead of strength. That's definitely an option, but the most important part is finding a greater affix to bash. We talked about that early in the video, so we're not going to cover it again now. Your tempers, we're going to run Challenging Shout cooldown reduction and stun duration. That is only because I bricked this. What I really wanted to run was Imposing Presence. Imposing Presence is in your skill tree. and it increases your maximum life by 18%. If we can get 3, 4 ranks onto our pants, we're looking at an additional 18 to 24% life. That's a huge number. So when you're looking for the tempers on your pants or on your chest piece, wherever you can afford it, that doesn't have to have resistances on it, try and roll Imposing Presence under the defensive tab. It is going to be a very big buff to your life, and that's how you're seeing barbarians with 80, 90, 150, 500,000 life, depending on what you have. Get your Imposing Presence if it's possible. On our boots, we're running Hectic. Every 5 attacks with Bash, we're going to be cooling down our active cooldowns by 2 seconds. So we're going to do one at a time. The more that you have cooling down at one time, the less likely you're going to be getting the ones that you want. So trying to manage your cooldown sometimes is necessary. If you run into a moment where you have to pop everything and you pop everything, that's okay. While running a high level pit, your most important cooldowns for this are going to be your Rupture for your additional attack speed, your Steel Grasp, and then your Iron Skin. You're going to moderate these two because these two will actually cool down these as you use them. So you want to make sure that you're using things in moderation and you're not just spamming everything that comes up as soon as it's up. You want the most cooldowns from Hectic to go to one of these affixes. Because I'm running the Harlequin's Crest and I don't have any armor on there, I wanted to put the armor on my boots. If you can move this around, and like I said, with the Melted Heart of Zelig, if you put armor onto your chest piece instead of Ranks of Iron Skin, this can become Ranks of Warcry. It is probably going to be kind of a hard roll because rolling ranks on anything right now seems to be a challenge, but Ranks of Warcry is going to be a great option for you. Warcry is also a brawling skill, so if you happen to roll brawling skills, save it, and then you can try and roll Warcry unless it gets too expensive. Movement speed is also a great option if that rolls too. Anywhere that you can put movement speed is going to get you out from underneath one of the boss's abilities. So running movement speed anywhere, I am 100% for it. Or the tempering. Instead of barrier generation, I was actually going for crowd control duration, but you guys know how it goes. We don't always get the tempers we want. Sometimes we brick it. You have to remember that this runs sometimes even without the perfect gear. We can still clear high levels of the pits even if we don't hit that perfect temper. Barrier generation will work for Iron Skin, so this isn't a complete waste. And because I don't have an affix of movement speed, I rolled movement speed on a temper here. That is definitely the way that you want to go. When you go to put tempering onto your boots, instead of trying to roll movement speed here from Barbarian Motion, you have 5 options here. Use Natural Motion. Have 25% chance of getting movement speed versus a 20% chance of getting movement speed. Give yourself a better odds making sure to get that movement speed onto your boots. For a weapon, we're going to be running Moonrise. Damaging an enemy with a basic skill grants 4% attack speed for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Upon reaching maximum stacks, you enter Vampiric Blood Rage, gaining 160% basic skill damage and 15% movement speed for 10 seconds. Because we attack so fast, this is going to be up almost all the time. As soon as it falls off, we attack 5 times, it stacks back up. It is a major source of damage, increased attack speed, and movement speed for us. For the affixes, this is going to be the same across all of the weapons. You're going to roll strength, maximum life, critical strike damage. I haven't rolled any greater affixes yet. I'll find one eventually, but right now I rolled damage while berserking and then bash cleave. Like I said before when we were going over the Paragon board, I put damage while berserking on both my 2-handed weapons. It was just a really easy way for me to hit my 300%. There is other ways to do it. You can roll damage while berserking here, damage while berserking on your one-hander, and then put it on a ring or move a couple points around the Paragon board so that you get to your 300%. I'm at 354. It still is 54% additive damage, so I'm still gaining damage out of it. Just if you want to get just closer to that 300% to get your max and then use something like critical strike damage or damage close to get more damage out of it, you can. For the bash cleave damage, this is where you want to have at least 2 masterworkings into. I've gotten lucky on 2 out of the 3 of the weapons that I have. I want to have all 3 of them at 2. For the one-handed mace that we're running, and you have to run a one-handed mace with bash or you can't use dual wield. Strength, critical strike, maximum life, same thing. I rolled damage close. I do have a rogue leveled up. I could roll temper for critical strike damage on this if I wanted to. I only have 1 temper left. Not going to risk it. I have a pretty good roll on it, so we're going to leave it right there. I got 2 master workings into bash cleave, so I'm happy with it. Just going to leave that alone and let it sit. For the aspect, we're running Edge Mastered. You deal 20% of multiplicative damage based on how much fury you have at the time that you cast your skill. Because we're running bash, which is a generator and not a spender. We're always going to have full resources. We're always going to have that 20% multiplicative damage. Moving on to our Ra Melodni. The reason that we're going to be running this, and we'll talk about this a lot during gameplay, we talked about it a little bit before, we're running it because skills using this weapon deal 4% increased damage per point of fury that you have. We're going to always be full. We're always going to be running around 215 fury to 250 fury. That's going to give us anywhere from about an 85 to a 97% increase to damage when we use this weapon. For the masterworking, you want to roll max fury. It is very, very hard to hit a triple. I cannot believe the luck that I had with this. If you end up rolling anything into one of the damage dealers, that is okay. Try for 2 rolls into the max fury. If it gets too expensive and you need to scrap it, that's okay. Make sure that you have the 0.4%. That is the most important part of this weapon. The slashing weapon, we're running intercom. This is interchangeable. If you need more attack speed, you swap rapid with intercom, and you really won't be losing a lot of damage. With this build, we're probably going to end up dodging a lot, which means that we're only going to be getting that 20 multiplicative damage instead of the 60 because we won't be standing still for 3 seconds too often. So if we do swap rapid with intercom, we're going to go from 20 multiplicative damage down to 10 multiplicative damage, but we're going to gain an additional 30% increase attack speed. For your affixes, we're going to be running same thing, strength, max life, critical strike damage. I rolled damage while berserking again, and then your bash cleave damage. I'll probably end up re-rolling this because I want to get that double onto my bash cleave, but I just haven't been lucky enough, and it gets very expensive, so I just haven't gotten there yet. On our ring, we just were talking about it rapid. This is interchangeable. This gives us 30% increased attack speed to our basic skill, which is bash, and which is what we use all the time. For your affixes, the 2 must-haves: attack speed, critical strike chance. After that, it's up to you. Personally, if I'm running for damage, I actually would probably want to run strength. Strength gives you 10% of whatever it is into a multiplicative number that adds into your skill damage. If you look over strength, I have 2,600 strength. I gain 262% increased skill damage. If I add 100 strength, I gain 10% more damage to that. If I add my 66% critical strike damage to my, I would guess, almost 25 to 2,800 additive damage, it only gives me about a 2 to 3% increase to damage. Strength is going to be a bigger modifier than most of the affixes here if they're not multiplicative. I haven't found myself another ring, but for tempering, this is actually how you want your tempering to look. We're running full critical strike damage here, and I'm going to be running Warcry cooldown reduction. This ring is almost perfect. One greater affix away from it being absolutely everything I wanted. I'm not mad about having the 25% on the strength. I got exactly what I wanted with the attack speed. If I rolled a triple, I would have been absolutely overjoyed. Didn't work out that way because that's okay. But try and get your attack speed at least to 2. You want to stack as much attack speed as possible with this build, so getting your attack speed to 2, just like these 2 are, is key. For the aspect here, we're going to be running elements. Every 7 seconds, we're going to be gaining a 30% multiplicative damage to physical. This is going to be a pretty big buff, and as it ticks over, which we'll show in the gameplay loop, you'll see a very significant increase to your damage here. For your amulet, we're going to be running adaptability. Now, we're really only concerned with the bottom part of this. When cast at or above maximum resource, basic skills deal 120% increased damage. Bash is a basic skill. We're going to see 120% increased damage all the time to bash. For your affixes, we're running attack speed, critical strike damage, cooldown reduction. This was great. I've got the 25% that I wanted. I could have gone with a 25% to cooldown reduction instead of the 125% of the critical strike chance. Because we are running such a high critical strike chance, I probably won't re-roll it again because I got the 2 to attack speed bonus, and that is going to be key to this. I needed the extra resistances, so I rolled resistance for one of the tempering here, and then I rolled movement speed for the second one. If you have your resistances sorted out, you can roll something else onto this. This was just what I needed to make my build work. For your gems, whatever resistances you don't have tempered, those are the 3 gems that you're going to put in. In our weapons, we're going to be running basic damage. This is going to be the highest additive damage that you can get from any of your gems. And because we're using Bash, which is a basic skill, this is active all the time. It's not like it's conditional to doing damage to vulnerable or critical strike damage or anything like that. This is active all the time, and it's the highest number that we can get. For the armor, this is where you can change it up a little bit. I'm running all strength gems. If you feel squishy, which this build without the Heart of Selig might feel a little squishy running all of these gems, swap the gems to rubies. So this way you increase your maximum life. It is a 45% increase to maximum life, so it is pretty crazy. Ta-da, we magically have 59,000 life. and you hop into the pits, you can also run Elixir of Antivenom, pops you up to 71,000. And if you really want to stack your life, you just pop another Elixir of Fortitude, and we're now at 86,000. This is also going to be increased by every single rank of Imposing Presence that you have. Imagine adding 4 more ranks and adding an additional 24% increased life. We're now going to be looking at over 100,000 life. This is how Barbarians stack so much life. If that's how you want to play it and that's going to be your gameplay style, that is absolutely the option for you. Gems can be changed to whatever you want to run. We talked about adding in your willpower gems too. So whatever works best for your build, try it out, experiment it. This whole season has been about experimentation. It's been a ton of fun. And now for the fun part. Melted Heart of Selig. This is where we're going to change things around. I got incredibly lucky here again. I don't know how it happened. And it was like boom, 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 3 points into all stats. Why is that good? This is what allowed me to activate those extra nodes on my Paragon board and gain additional damage reduction just by having those all stats done. Damage while healthy is not really great because it's just additive damage. I don't need any resource generation because we're not going to be spending any resources. The movement speed, 25% is enough for this build in order to be able to get out of things. It's already more than what I'm running on my other amulet. So those 3 points into all stats, I don't know how it happened, but it did. Let's put it on, and I'll show you the changes to the aspects that we're going to need to make in order to make this run. When we put this on, we're going to be losing adaptability. Now remember, adaptability is incredibly important. We need to be having this up because we're going to be losing a ton of damage. We won't be getting the 120, but we're still going to be getting the 80. So we're going to put it on our ring instead of elements. Elements is conditional. We're only going to be running it for 7 seconds at a time. So if we swap this out to adaptability, we put this on, this will now give us 80% increased damage when we're above 50% maximum resource. Selig is incredibly tanky. What this does and how this works, we've now added 60 Fury to our bar line. Remember, your Ramaladnes gains extra damage based on the amount of Fury that we have. If we put on an Elixir of Resourcefulness, which is what we normally run when we're going to be going into a high level pit, we are currently going to be running 304 Fury. That might change a little bit when you move the skill points around back to where it should have been for this build that we went over in the skill tree. But we're going to be running anywhere from 299 to 304. That is about 125 to 130% increased damage just from adding the Melted Heart of Selig. Now remember, we did lose 40% damage. Selig is also going to allow us to stand still because we are going to be taking a far less amount of damage because of the aspect on Selig. And I'll cover that in a second. Because we're going to be able to stand still for longer and not die, we're going to be able to take advantage of the 60% buff from Intercom. By standing still, the bonus is tripled. 20 times 3 is 60% increased damage. Now we have gained 40% increased damage from Intercom. We have gained 30% increased damage from adding the resources from the Heart of Selig. Losing that 40%, we've actually gained something by putting on the Heart of Selig. Let's talk about the aspect. I think I've said the Heart of Selig enough. So we're just going to talk about the aspect. When taking damage, 75% is drained as 2 resources every 1% of your max life that's lost. 75% is drained as 2 resources for every 1% lost. When we lose 10% life, after that 75%, we're going to be losing 20 Fury instead of losing that life. It is incredibly tanky and it makes all of the damage that's incoming to you much more sustainable. So this way you can stand still, take advantage from Intercom, and get that extra damage increase. Because we're going to be running the Heart of Selig and we don't need to worry as much about defense, we're also not going to be running Iron Skin. We're going to be running Rallying Cry. We talked about that a little bit in the skill tree. We still have the Iron Skin aspect on. Now, when we hit these high level pits, our main concern is damage. There's really only one aspect in the Codex of Power that is going to add just a little bit of damage to our damage line. That's going to be Concussive Strikes. Whenever we hit dazed enemies, which counts as a boss being staggered, we're going to get that 20% multiplicative damage. It is very small because the boss can only be staggered about 3 to 4 times per run, but any little bit that we can get out of this may be the difference between failing and succeeding in a run. If you would like to run something more defensive, you absolutely can. You can put Might here to gain additional 20% damage reduction, but for now, and for what I'm going to run, I'm going to put on your 20%. And that's it. Those are the only 2 changes that you need to make for aspects when you're switching to the Melted Heart of Selig. We talked about the changes that need to be made to the skill tree in the very beginning. So make sure you do the changes to the skills, make sure you do the changes to your aspects. And then if you need to move around the glyph in the Paragon board, then you can do that too. Those are the 3 changes that you're going to make when you're switching to the Melted Heart of Sellig. Not necessary. I cleared a tier 120 with and without the Melted Heart of Sellig. So you don't need it, but let me tell you, it makes it a lot easier running Sellig because you can just stand there. It's pretty incredible. It is a very, very powerful piece of gear. So if you have access to it, try it out, see what you think, see how it feels. Last thing we're going to touch on is we're going to touch on our expertise. Just like always, and any build guide that's out there should be telling you to do this, the only one that you're going to want to run is Two-Handed Axe expertise. This gives you 10% multiplicative increased damage to vulnerable enemies. We're going to try and keep vulnerable damage up as much as possible. You don't need to be running a Two-Handed Axe to run this. That's the beauty of your expertise. You just have a two-handed sword equipped, but you still can take advantage of having the Two-Handed Axe bonus. I'm going to head to the training grounds. I'll show you a quick gameplay loop, so this way you can see what this looks like when we use it in action. We're going to start with the Melted Heart of Sellig version. Gameplay loop for this is actually very simple. The most important things that you need to be able to keep up is going to be Rupture. That 40% extra increase to attack speed, you will feel. It is an absolute must. So if this is about to come off cooldown, that should be the very first thing that you cast. I found out very quickly you can cast Rupture into the air and not hit anything, and then you don't get the bonus anymore. So you have to make sure that you're casting Rupture into a target. So if you need to Steel Grasp first and then cast Rupture so that you hit something, make sure that that's what you do. Don't waste a Rupture and have a 7-second cooldown on this and waiting for 7 seconds to get back that 40% increase cooldown. It's going to be pretty rough if you do. I've done it way too many times. When we're attacking the training dummy, the only thing that we're really going to need to worry about is standing still, because this build is built around standing still. And we're going to make sure we keep up our berserking every 2 seconds using Steel Grasp. If it's not up every 2 seconds, it'll be very, very close. If you think that it's going to come off a cooldown just a second too late, you can use any of the shouts. The shouts will cool down either Rupture or Steel Grasp by 2 seconds, or both of them if they're both on cooldown. Using your shouts are going to be incredibly important, and managing their shouts is something that takes a little bit of practice. So as you're going through your boss fights, don't just pop all 3 at one time and then you're done. Use them as the boss fight progresses. If you need to use one, like let's say Rallying Cry because you're crowd controlled, use that. Maybe you don't have to pop Challenging Shout because you took a little bit of damage, but your health is going back up because you used Undying. So you're going to hold off on using Challenging Shout until you absolutely need to use it, or you need to get a cooldown on your Rupture or on your Steel Grasp. I'm going to show you what this looks like. We're going to start off with just Bash. You'll get to see the attack speed. So once Moonrise kicks in, this is your increased attack speed with Moonrise. Your Moonrise buff is right here. This is what it looks like now. So it just fell off. Now we build up 1 stack. We hit again, we build up 2 stacks, again, 3, 4, and now 5. So this gives us our extra movement speed, our extra damage, and gives us our extra attack speed. As we go, now I'm going to show you what the attack speed looks like when you cast your Rupture. We cast Rupture. Notice the difference? It's pretty insane. So we want to make sure that every time that comes up, we're using this. I haven't used any Berserking yet, and we haven't made enemies vulnerable. So as we're going through and we do this, we want to use as little cooldowns as we can, because if you're looking to see how fast Rupture comes back up, that's because that's the only thing getting cooldown by Hectic. So now when I use Steel Grasp, watch the damage increase. The damage numbers go way up just because we're keeping these vulnerable and we have Berserking active. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add Steel Grasp, Rupture, and Warcry. So we're going to Rupture first, increase attack speed, use Steel Grasp, and then use Warcry. Our numbers are hitting 615 million for overpowered crits. And I'm not even running guaranteed overpowered crits. We're just hitting a lot of overpowers because we're attacking so quickly. That is it. That is your gameplay loop. You're going to use Challenging Shout when you need to take a little bit of damage, or you know that there's going to be a big hit from the boss. Then you pop your Challenging Shout. Challenging Shout can be used to stagger at bosses. Just remember, if you watched when we only had Rupture up to cooldown, it came back up very, very quickly. So the less that you have cooling down, Hectic will only choose those things that are cooling. So make sure that you have as little cooling down as possible, other than the really, really important ones. This is the failsafe. If you get stunned, frozen, slowed, and you know something's about to hit you and it's going to really hurt, you have Rallying Cry as an option to get you out of that. That'll give you Fortify, and that'll also give you your Unstoppable and extra movement speed. Warcry should be used pretty much on cooldown. If you have a moment where you don't have the attack speed bonus from Rupture, make sure Rupture goes off first, then pop your Warcry. This is pretty much going to be the exact same gameplay loop as you're going to see if you switch back to your normal amulet. The only difference is if when we put this on here, and I can even show you this without swapping any aspects, when we start attacking, actually our base attack speed, when Moonrise goes off, is actually going to be faster. And then when we use Rupture, the attack speed is insane. So this is going to be the only difference that you're really going to notice is that incredibly fast attack speed versus very, very fast attack speed. That's the build. This is going to be my final version of my pushing build. Let me know what you think in the comments. Drop by my live stream. I'm live on YouTube and Twitch just about every night. I'm more than happy to answer questions. We built this build together as a community. I had people in chat constantly just giving me suggestions that we tested out live on stream. I got to move things around, test different aspects. It was a ton of fun to put this together and really get it to where it is right now. We're clearing pit 120. I'm going to be able to clear higher. I've done it with 0 holy bolts. If I put holy bolts on, I probably could have gone 125, maybe 126 if I got lucky. This build is fun. It's easy to get into, which is really, really great. In order to make it scale up to be really, really, really incredible, you do need a lot of really good gear. So take that in consideration. Everything that I have is masterwork to 12, except for my chest piece because I need to replace it. Don't be afraid to masterwork things, but you have to get the right rolls in order for the damage to go up. You can look at this damage here on the screen and say, well, why am I not hitting it? But have you hit the same tempers? Have you hit the same masterworks? Is your gear exactly the same? It all is really, really variable. And I got incredibly lucky with a lot of my rolls. So if you watch what you're watching on the screen and you don't see the same results, it's a journey. We're not a sprint. It's going to take some time to get there. I have played a single character through the entire season, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm just getting ready to start a second build. So I have people in my clan that are on their 3rd and 4th characters right now. So I've put a lot of time, a lot of effort into it, a lot of farming, because I have to get gold. We have to do a whole bunch of things. I've had a lot of generous people in the clan. I'm rambling right now, but I love this build. It is a ton of fun. Get out there, try it out. Hit me up in the comments if you have any questions about it.